Have you ever wondered why his attention snaps into sharp focus the moment she steps into the room, as if her presence tugs at some hidden thread in his soul? In the flicker of her gaze there is a silent decree she holds dominion over the parts of him he keeps carefully concealed. She moves like a paradox, a graceful enigma who both invites and forbids. His ego jostles against her quiet confidence, craving her approval, even as it fears her judgment. In her stillness, she becomes a mirror reflecting the fragments of his shadow that he refuses to acknowledge. She doesn't chase him. Instead, she stands rooted in her own gravity, an unshakable island that beckons with magnetic inevitability. His animus, that inner masculine ideal she embodies, quivers at her threshold, unsure whether to storm her walls or bow in reverence. You sense the tension in the space between them, the electric hum of projected desires and ancient archetypes colliding. She carries the weight of her own wounded healer, having tended to her own wounds until the scars shimmer with self-knowledge, and now they shine like runes of silent power. Most women might soften at his pleas, but she is forged in a different fire. Her boundaries are the battlements of a fortress built by her own hands, each brick laid through trials of rejection and self-discovery. When a man approaches her, he is met by the unspoken declaration that she seeks nothing less than her own sovereignty. He may attempt to enthrall her with compliments, gifts, or feigned grandeur, but her attention remains tethered to the truth of herself. In that refusal to be enticed by shallow flattery, she compels his ego to descend from its lofty pedestal and face the hidden corridors of his psyche. Imagine this, you observe, as he stands before her, words hanging in the air like fragile lanterns, only to have her silence extinguish them. In that void, his mind races, projecting fantasies onto her calm facade. Why won't she respond, he wonders while she watches his struggle with gentle detachment. She is an oracle of his own making, guiding him toward the unacknowledged aspects of his being. His discomfort is the seed of his awakening. When he recoils from her stillness, it is because he is startled by the depths within himself that she reflects. Today, perhaps more than ever, restraint has become her most potent weapon. She offers no guarantees, only the invitation to see her as she is and to meet her at the level of authentic exchange. Her attraction is forbidden only in the sense that it demands an initiation, a rite of passage through which he must face his own shadows before he can truly stand beside her. She does not reward him for his conquest. She challenges him to earn his own integrity. Some women rely on laughter or tears to manipulate attention, but she has learned the art of absence. In her absence, his thoughts spiral, constructing myths about her inner life. He wonders what fears she battles, what desires she suppresses, and in that speculation, he surrenders his ego to the unknown. When he chases certainty, she withdraws further into the sanctuary of her own heart, reminding him that control is an illusion. You feel the power in that withdrawal, how effortlessly she transforms his pursuit into self-reflection. Seneca once counseled that true power lies in mastery of one's own passions, and she lives by this wisdom. Her allure is not a siren song, but a demonstration of emotional sovereignty. She has done the inner work, faced the dragon of her ego, embraced her shadow, and emerged reborn. In witnessing her emergence, he glimpses the path to his own individuation. His ego humbles itself, recognizing that it cannot command what it has not first understood within. Has this ever happened to you? To meet a woman whose very existence provokes you to stand before your own mirror, flawed, yearning and yearning to transcend. She does not offer validation. She insists on authenticity. And in that insistence she commands his ego with a force more compelling than any seduction. The more he grasps for her, the more she recedes until he grasps only at the edges of his own projections. In her wake, he is left to sift through the ruins of his pride, gathering the fragments of a self that must be rebuilt from the ground up. And perhaps if he is brave enough, he will answer her silent call, not by owning her attention, but by owning his own truth. Only then can he stand before her as an equal, not as a beggar. Her aura does not flicker with longing. It stands steadfast, like a solitary torch, illuminating the path into the depths of his own psyche. He feels drawn, compelled by an instinct older than language, a pulse that whispers of ancestral patterns and collective memories. In her gaze he discerns the silhouette of his own Anima, that inner feminine guide he has long neglected. She beckons him into a dance with his unspoken truths, leading him through corridors of doubt and corridors of desire. He finds himself unsettled by her refusal to lean into his drama. When his heart pounds with urgent need, she listens without flinching, as though his tremors were mere ripples on a still pond. And in her stillness, those ripples grow into waves that surge beneath his conscious mind. He stumbles upon his buried fears of inadequacy, of abandonment, of the void he cannot fill with words or gestures. You can almost see the shiver that ripples across his ego when it realizes how impoverished it is, without genuine self-awareness. She offers no conventional tenderness, no scripted sweetness. Instead, she delivers clarity, an unvarnished reflection of his own projections. Each compliment he hurls like a hand grenade seeking to blow open her defenses only ricochets back at him, exposing the hollowness of his intentions. He is forced to confront the poor currency of superficial charm. In that rupture he senses an opportunity, the chance to excavate his authenticity and shape it into something worthy of her respect. Most men are cautioned against vulnerability, taught to mask their wounds behind bravado. But in her presence pretense dissolves. He begins to perceive that true strength lies not in fortifying the ego, but in allowing it to kneel before the altar of self-examination. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, and she has become his greatest impediment, an unwavering mirror that propels him toward inner growth. There is a moment when he falters, senses the abyss yawning beneath his polished exterior. His confidence quivers like a candle in the wind. Yet she does not reach to steady him. Instead, she stands firm, embodying the Stoic ideal of self-possession. You might think this cruelty, but it is the purest form of kindness. By refusing to rescue him, she compels him to find his own footing, to confront what lies beneath the veneer. She is not a prize to be captured, but a threshold into a deeper world. In the silence that stretches between their exchanged glances, he hears the echo of his own heartbeat, as if it were a drum summoning him to battle with the forces within. He battles the urge to flee, the instinct to retreat into the safety of familiar patterns. In the crucible of her attention he must choose: remain a wounded ego, or become the architect of his own healing. Do you feel it, that moment when the chase turns inward and the object of desire transcends the relationship, becoming a catalyst for transformation? She is the spark that ignites his resolve to claim sovereignty over his own story. No longer content to play the part of the conqueror, he discovers the value of surrender, the surrender to truth, to the work of individuation that Jung described as the alchemical wedding of ego and shadow. Sometimes he tries to test the limits of her detachment. A late-night message, a grand gesture in public, even the promise of unshakable devotion. Each attempt dissolves like ink in water. She responds not with anger, but with serene neutrality, as if his pleas were merely the babble of a frightened animal seeking comfort. In that absence of reaction, he glimpses the liberation that comes when one no longer pleads for validation. He learns that to desire her is to demand nothing, to offer everything. She teaches him that desire need not be a chain, but a form of illumination. When he first encounters his own desire reflected in her eyes, he experiences a clarion call. Seek the meaning behind the craving. What hidden longing does he mask with romance? What narrative from his past does he replay like a worn vinyl record? The more he peers into these questions, the less he is driven by reflex, and the more he moves with intention. Some might call her cold, but in truth she possesses a fierce warmth, a warmth born of unbreakable self-respect. Her heart is a crucible in which compassion and discipline are fused. To stand before her is to witness the alchemy of discipline meeting love. As he begins to mirror her strength, he senses a subtle shift. His ego expands beyond its self-imposed prison, embracing the paradox that freedom and connection are inseparable. As the night deepens, he stands at the shore of an inner sea, watching the tides of his emotions crest and fall. She watches him too, her silhouette, a silent lighthouse. He realizes that in commanding her ego, she commanded his own. He is no longer the man who once sought her approval. He is the man who has learned to approve of himself. In that moment of recognition, the forbidden nature of their attraction dissolves into something sacred, a mutual acknowledgement of their power to awaken one another's souls. He once believed that power lay in possession, in the conquest of her heart. Yet now he learns that true power is found in presence, in standing fully awake to the gravity of this magnetic polarity. She is the crucible that transmutes his fragmented self into an integrated whole. In her reflection, he sees the jagged edges of his own shadow, the parts he neatly tucked away behind decorum and discipline. And in witnessing him waver, she does not rush forward to collect the shattered pieces. Rather, she stands back an alchemist's flame, coaxing him to gather them himself and forge them into something unbreakable. As morning light seeps through the curtains, he confronts memories of past romances, where devotion was bartered like a currency. He recalls how he once mistook attachment for affection, clinging to gestures instead of substance. Now with her, he recognizes that every gesture must spring from authenticity, or else it rings hollow. Stoic wisdom echoes in his mind. Desire must be governed by reason, and reason must honor feeling. Through her, he glimpses this delicate balance where emotion and intellect dance in harmonious tension. In her silent command, she rewrites the script of attraction. No longer is pursuit a simple drama of cat and mouse. It becomes a sacred rite of passage. His ego, once a fortress of reflexive defenses, now trembles with the promise of transformation. Do you sense the shift, the subtle realignment of his inner compass as he orients himself not toward conquest, but toward communion first with his own soul, and then perhaps with hers? She offers lessons in boundaries without bitterness, and in empathy without surrender. When he describes his fears, fear of unworthiness, fear of abandonment, she does not dissipate them with comforting words. Instead, she names them, reflecting them back as stars in the night sky of his unconscious. Her words, sparse as they may be, carry the weight of honest witness. In that witnessing, he finds the courage to face the crevices of his psyche he once disregarded. Some say that attraction fades when truth is revealed, that mystery is the lifeblood of desire. But with her revelation kindles a deeper flame. Each glimpse into his own vulnerabilities becomes a spark that draws him closer, not away. Jung taught that the anima animates us, this inner feminine presence that shapes the masculine soul. She is the living embodiment of his anima, guiding him through terrors he never dared to face. The terror of being seen, the terror of losing control, the terror of being wholly responsible for his own happiness. He remembers a moment when he tried to shield himself with humor, cracking a joke to diffuse his rising panic. Her gaze held him unwavering in its calm intensity. The laughter faded, leaving him raw and exposed. And in that unguarded split second, he felt an almost luminous shift. His armor loosened, and a warmth bloomed in his chest. He sensed that what he had once called fear was actually an invitation to deeper presence. Her attraction is forbidden only to those who fear their own potency. She does not seek to dominate. She seeks to illuminate. When he flexes his ego like a muscle, she does not shrink. She meets force with unflinching compassion, allowing him to feel the full weight of his own drive. And in that endurance, his drive softens into devotion to his own growth. He learns that to honor her, he must first honor himself. Imagine yourself standing at the crossroads of your own becoming, where every desire is a question and every hesitation a doorway. She is that doorway, and he hesitates no longer. He steps through, relinquishing the role of pursuer and embracing the path of seeker. In that moment, attraction transcends its usual form. It becomes an alliance in which both hearts stand as keepers of each other's sacred flame, yet remain sovereign over their own. There is no climax in this story of command and surrender, only a continuous unfolding. He does not emerge as a victor, and she does not yield as a prize. Instead, they converge in a shared space of mutual awakening, each reflecting the other's light back into the world. In this union of equals, attraction loses its coercive edge and becomes an invitation to collective individuation. You may wonder if such a bond could endure, or if the magnetism of forbidden attraction inevitably dissolves over time. But she has offered a rare promise that when two souls commit to inner work, their magnetism deepens rather than diminishes. The ego no longer competes for dominion. It collaborates in the creation of something greater, a tapestry woven from threads of vulnerability, courage, and profound respect. As the narrative of their connection weaves onward, you feel the echo of an ancient truth that the greatest attraction is not the lust for possession, but the yearning for truth. In commanding his ego, she taught him to command his own life, and in commanding her own life, she became the living proof of her words. The forbidden becomes inevitable, the unattainable becomes essential. He had come to believe that love was a destination, a summit to be planted with the flag of conquest. Yet in her orbit, he discovers that love is an unending pilgrimage, a journey through the contours of his own soul. She holds the map not to a place, but to the territories within himself he has long abandoned. Her attraction is a guide, drawing him toward unexplored caverns of feeling and fields of dormant potential. He remembers the first time he noticed the tremor in his chest, as if a hidden spring had burst open within him. It was not her smile or her laughter that ignited him, but her unwavering calm in the face of his storm. In that moment he glimpsed the possibility that true allure is born not of external beauty, but of inner equilibrium. His ego, trained to chase sensory delight, balked at this realization. Yet something deeper stirred the hope of becoming someone capable of offering that same stillness in return. In their shared silences, he learns that words can be both bridges and barriers. When he spoke of his achievements or recounted tales of past glories, she listened without distraction, as though his stories were mere ornaments. But when he spoke of his fears, those fragile, unadorned confessions, she leaned forward, her presence a sanctuary. In honoring his vulnerability, she teaches him that intimacy is forged in the crucible of authenticity, not in the theater of grand performances. Some women adorn themselves with mystery to weave spells of fascination. She, however, wears her mystery as a cloak of sovereignty, guarding the sanctum of her inner world. He is drawn to her not by the promise of unveiling her secrets, but by the prospect of tending to the secrets of his own psyche. In pursuing her, he becomes a seeker of wisdom, each question he poses to her a mirror of a question he must pose to himself. He recalls how often he had mistaken attachment for connection, believing that proximity and possession were proof of intimacy. With her there is closeness without clinging, unity without fusion. When they sit side by side, he feels the electricity of their shared space, yet neither attempts to bridge the distance through force. Instead, they honor the space itself, recognizing that true connection arises when two sovereign souls choose to inhabit the same moment. Imagine the alchemy of two egos, each hardened by past wounds, gradually melting beneath the heat of mutual respect. He watches as she navigates his projections with the grace of a high priestess, transforming his fantasies into reflections of his own longing. Her gaze traces the contours of his intention, discerning the purity of his motive. Does he seek her, or does he seek himself through her? Each revelation shatters a fragment of his old identity, making space for an integrated self to emerge. In the quiet hours before dawn, he contemplates the paradox she embodies. She is at once the forbidden fruit and the living water, a source of intrigue and sustenance. His desire pulses like a heartbeat, yet he learns that desire need not be a hunger to be sated. Instead, it can be a beacon illuminating the path toward greater self-awareness. When he follows that beacon, he does not find her waiting with open arms. He finds himself standing firmer in his own. Her command over his ego is not a seizure of power, but a gracious invitation to partnership. She extends no crown yet in her respect for his autonomy. She crowns him with confidence. He senses that the most profound attraction is not a conquest, but a mutual ascent, each elevating the other toward the summit of self-actualization. In this dance there is no victor and no vanquished, only two souls spiraling ever upward. Do you feel the resonance of this transformation? The way genuine attraction kindles not obsession, but devotion to growth. He discovers that love is not an external force, but an inner revolution. With each encounter he sheds a layer of resistance, and with each unburdening he gains strength. Her presence becomes the crucible in which his ego is refined, not crushed, polished, until it reflects the light of his own authenticity. She is not a trophy to be won, nor a prize to be paraded. She is a catalyst, a spark that ignites the long-dormant embers of his true self. And as his authenticity blazes forth, his attraction to her shifts from craving to reverence. Where once he sought to possess her, he now seeks to honor her, and in doing so, he honors himself. Their bond transcends the binary of hunter and hunted. It becomes a sacred covenant between two sovereign beings who choose to walk side by side, each guiding the other to deeper realms of self-discovery. In commanding his ego, she unveils the power of surrender, not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender to truth and to the shared journey of individuation. As daylight breaks, he realizes that the forbidden nature of their attraction was never about restriction, but about initiation. She initiated him into a new paradigm of love, one that demands inner work, authenticity, and mutual elevation. And in that initiation, he found not a prison, but a portal, the portal to his own greatness. There comes a moment when he realizes that her power over him was never hers to wield, but his, to receive an invitation to claim the depths of his own being. He remembers how his breath quickened the first time she spoke of her solitude as sanctuary rather than punishment. In that one simple revelation, he grasped that solitude is not the absence of love, but the presence of self. His ego, accustomed to equating loneliness with failure, trembled at the prospect of standing alone. Yet when he allowed himself to taste that solitude beside her side by side, but separate, he discovered an unexpected serenity. You might think this paradox impossible, two people together yet, each entirely themselves, but she embodies it with effortless grace. In her company, he learns that intimacy is not about erasing boundaries, but about honoring them. When he senses the edges of her being, he no longer views them as walls to breach, but as contours to appreciate. Each boundary becomes a declaration of her sovereignty, and by mirroring them, he declares his own. As dusk descends, casting their world in muted gold, he finds himself craving her counsel, not to console him, but to challenge him. He articulates questions he dared not speak in daylight. What if I am not enough? What if I fail again? When the shadows lengthen, she answers, not with assurances, but with questions of her own. What would you do if you knew you were? What have you denied yourself by seeking safety? In that exchange, he senses the power of inquiry over comfort. She teaches him that the bravest act is to question one's own certainties. Some might mistake her firmness for rigidity, but in truth she is fluid, as water unyielding in purpose, yet yielding in form. She flows around his defenses, wearing them thin until they dissolve. You see it when he tries to seduce her, with familiar patterns, compliments scripted for past lovers, frenetic gestures of grandiosity, and she receives them like pebbles dropped into a vast lake. The ripples fade quickly, leaving the surface smooth again. In that moment he learns that only offerings born of his authentic self will leave a lasting mark. He recalls the night he shared his childhood story, the tale of a boy who learned early that love required performance. As he spoke, her eyes glowed with recognition, not pity. In witnessing his narrative, she offered him something more precious than sympathy, the reflection of a shared human wound. In the crucible of her compassion, he felt his shame soften, like iron heated then quenched, emerging tempered and resilient. Her compassion was fierce, not indulgent, but clarifying, shining a light into the shadowy corners he had long ignored. Imagine standing in that light, feeling the warmth as both an embrace and a mirror. He sees what he has hidden, the parts he deemed unlovable, the desires he refused to name, the dreams he abandoned for safety's sake. Each revelation is another shackle released, and as he releases them, his heart expands, making room for a love that is neither possession nor projection, but partnership. She never demands his surrender, she merely models her own. In watching her release the need for external validation, he feels the constriction in his chest loosen. The applause he once craved now seems hollow. What matters is the soft certainty that arises from within, a certainty he cultivates through small acts of integrity and bravery. With her attentive presence, he learns to trust his inner compass rather than the fickle winds of approval. Do you recognize this shift? The way attraction matures when it is watered by self-respect rather than by flattery. His longing for her once burned like a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. Now it glows like embers in a hearth, steady, life-giving, coaxing warmth rather than heat. He still desires her, but desire has become the soundtrack of his own transformation rather than a chain that binds him. As their stories continue to intertwine, he senses a deeper rhythm, a pulse that transcends individual longing. It is the heartbeat of collective growth, the recognition that two sovereign beings can elevate each other toward wholeness. In her, he witnesses the potential of humanity's alchemy shadow, embraced ego, refined and spirit liberated. She taught him that forbidden attraction was never a trap, but a threshold. By daring to engage with her, he dared to engage with his own edges. Each frontier he crossed led him not away from himself, but into a richer, more expansive selfhood. And in that expanse, attraction found its truest form, not a hunger, but a celebration of what it means to be fully alive. As the embers die down and night deepens, he knows that the journey is far from over. Individuation is not a destination, but a lifelong pilgrimage. Yet now he walks it with a companion who neither leads nor follows, but strides beside him in mutual respect. Together, they command their egos not by conquering each other, but by liberating themselves. In the hush of an early morning mist, he finds himself tracing the outline of her silhouette against the pale light, marveling at the silent power she exudes even in repose. The air between them vibrates not with words, but with possibility, an unspoken pact to venture ever deeper into the terrain of their own becoming. He senses that every moment with her is an initiation, each exchange a talisman against the complacency of his former self. Her mere presence invites him to stand at attention before the altar of his own potential. He recalls how in their first weeks together, he measured his worth by the intensity of his pursuit, late-night texts, sweeping compliments, the feverish rhythm of longing. Yet, with her such tactics proved futile. They threatened only to drive him further into the prison of his ego. Over time, he discovered that his greatest gestures were the quiet ones, a patient listening to her silence, a respectful pause at the edge of her boundaries, a willingness to sit beside her without need. In those moments, he learned that the truest accolade he could offer was the gift of his own unguarded self. Do you remember what it felt like to stand before a mirror and see something unexpected staring back? He experienced that shudder when she reflected his shadow without flinching. His jealousy, his impatience, the parts of himself he had cloaked in rationalizations. She did not chastise him. She simply held the mirror steady, anchored in her own self-possession. And in the stillness of that reflection, he felt a curious release, as though acknowledging his flaws was the key to transcending them. Her command over his ego unfolds not through domination, but through invitation. She invites him to question the stories he tells himself, that he must perform to be loved, that vulnerability is weakness, that desire demands ownership. With each question she poses, his defenses soften, revealing a wellspring of courage he barely knew existed. It is the courage to stand naked before his own inner tribunal, to speak the truths he once feared would fracture him. Sometimes, in the glow of candlelight, they share poems or passages that stir their souls. He once read Seneca's words aloud, "Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life," and watched her eyes shimmer with recognition. She nodded, as though those words had been whispered into her ear by her own unconscious. In that moment, he realized that their bond was anchored not merely in attraction, but in a shared devotion to living fully, one day at a time, one insight at a time. She teaches him the art of radical self-responsibility when he laments external circumstances, stress at work, the caprices of the world. She does not offer pat solutions. Instead, she challenges him. What role have you played in this? How can you transform your inner world to better navigate the outer one? In that challenge lies the seed of empowerment, reminding him that he is both the sculptor and the clay of his life's experience. As their relationship deepens, he feels the alchemical process of individuation stirring within him. Old wounds begin to heal, not through erasure, but through integration. He embraces his anger as a signal of unmet needs, his fear as a call to greater authenticity. And she celebrates these revelations not with platitudes, but with honest applause, honoring the bravery it takes to excavate buried truths. Her recognition feels like sunlight on newly sprouted leaves, coaxing him toward continuous growth. He senses that she too undergoes transformation in his presence. Her usual composure softens in private moments, revealing glimpses of wonder, of delight, of tender longing. In these fleeting glimpses, he realizes that commanding her ego did not harden her. It liberated her to receive love on equal terms. Their roles shift and blend. He becomes her mirror. She becomes his compass, each guiding the other through the labyrinth of the psyche. Imagine two dancers moving in perfect counterpoint, neither leading nor following, but weaving their individual rhythms into a shared choreography. That is the essence of their attraction, a dance of two sovereign beings who choose union without fusion. In every glance, every gesture, every silence, they affirm each other's sovereignty, acknowledging that freedom and intimacy are not opposites, but complementary forces. There are nights when he feels the old surge of possessiveness rising within him, a ghost of his former self, seeking to reclaim control. In those moments, she meets him with a steady gaze and asks, "What are you afraid of losing?" And as he speaks, his fear aloud, it loses its power to constrict him. He learns that naming his fear dissolves it, transforming it into a doorway rather than a wall. In this ritual of confession and witnessing their bond gains resilience. Her forbidden attraction, once a prompt for a chase, has become an emblem of shared destiny. He no longer seeks to command her. Instead, he seeks to command himself to steward his own growth, to steward their collective journey. And in commanding himself, he honors the magnetic field that drew him to her in the first place. As they walk together into the unfolding day, he understands that their story has no final chapter, only an ever-unfolding manuscript of mutual transformation. Each page they turn together reveals new insights, new challenges, new depths of connection. And through it all, the guiding truth remains: the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. He notices how the air itself seems to shift whenever she enters a room, as though reality recalibrates around her quiet magnetism. It is not the warmth of her laughter, nor the curve of her lips that commands the gravity of his being. It is the serenity that radiates from every line of her posture, the unspoken assurance that she needs nothing external to validate her. In sensing her peace, he feels stirred by a longing not to possess her, but to partake in that same deep-rooted tranquility. His ego, so often inflated by achievement and recognition, deflates at the sight of her effortless self-possession. He realizes that his accomplishments, once trophies of his worth, are mere footnotes beside the masterpiece of her inner life. In the corridors of his mind, memories of former lovers flicker like pale reflections on water. He recalls how quickly the surfaces of those relationships grew murky. how desire soured into dependence and intimacy collapsed under the weight of unspoken expectations. But with her expectation dissolves into presence. Each time they converse, she holds his gaze without demand, as if their shared attention were a sacred vessel unpolluted by the debris of past grievances. He finds himself marveling at the simplicity of being fully seen, fully acknowledged, without the need for elaborate performances or verbal consent. Some might deem their connection impractical, an echo of myth rather than a blueprint for daily life. Yet he sees its practicality in the way she navigates adversity with calm deliberation rather than frantic reaction. When he faces a setback at work, his first instinct is to conjure excuses or evade accountability. But in her presence, he learns a different approach to name the mistake, to accept the consequences, and to architect a wiser response. His ego, bruised by failure, finds solace, not in denial, but in the restorative power of honest reckoning. Imagine standing at the edge of a mountain peak, wind whipping around you, the world unfolding in panoramic vastness, and realizing that she stands beside you equally awed, equally grounded. That is the essence of their partnership, two sovereign souls who taste wonder together, refusing to shrink before the immensity of life. He recognizes that attraction at its peak is not a tempest of longing, but a shared breath of transcendence, a moment when the boundary between self and other blurs, revealing the timeless expanse at the heart of both. In the softer hours of twilight, he witnesses her vulnerability slipping through the cracks of her armor, an unexpected tremor in her voice as she recounts a childhood memory, or a fleeting tear glistening in her eye when she speaks of a lost dream. These glimpses of fragility do not diminish her. They deepen his reverence. He understands that commanding her ego was never about demanding flawlessness, but about earning the right to behold her whole light and shadow, intertwined strength and tenderness, inseparable. He longs to mirror that fullness, to allow his own vulnerability to shine with equal clarity. And so he experiments. He lets silence stretch between them until it becomes a shared canvas for unspoken emotion. He offers his scars without apology, naming the wounds he once concealed. In these moments, she shifts imperceptibly, leaning into him, not with pity, but with the fierce warmth of an ally. Her embrace when it comes is an affirmation that vulnerability is the birthplace of genuine connection. Do you feel the power of these small rebellions? The way each act of honesty chips away at the fortress of the ego. He finds that the more he reveals, the more his presence expands. His authenticity, once a fragile sapling, takes root in the fertile soil of their mutual trust. And as it grows, his attraction to her transforms from a consuming fire into a guiding light, illuminating the path of continual growth. There is a night when he surprises himself by asking a question he never dared to speak. "What do you need from me?" The words tumble out, unfamiliar and raw. She pauses as though considering the weight of his question before replying with her own inquiry. "What have you always needed, but never received?" In that moment of reciprocal curiosity, he feels the boundaries between them soften, each question a bridge connecting their inner worlds. Some seekers search for meaning in distant philosophies or exotic rites, but he finds his pilgrimage in the simple act of honest dialogue with her. Her forbidden attraction, once a catalyst for chase, now becomes a wellspring of inquiry. He realizes that in commanding his ego, she taught him to command his own evolution. No longer driven by fear or craving, he moves with intention, guided by the compass of self-awareness she helped him discover. As the hours pass, he notices how their laughter intertwines with moments of solemn reflection, how their shared silences hum with unspoken understanding. This dynamic interplay, light and shadow, silence and sound, autonomy and union, becomes the cradle of their magnetism. Each aspect sustains the other, weaving a tapestry of attraction that is neither fragile nor fixed, but alive with the pulse of continual renewal. In the final hush before dawn, he stands beside her once more, feeling the world hold its breath. He understands that the forbidden nature of their attraction was never about denial, but about initiation. an initiation into the art of commanding oneself before commanding another's heart. And as first light filters through the window, he knows that the truest command is the one held within the command to remain ever curious, ever courageous, ever committed to the journey of becoming. In the hush that follows night's deepest sigh, he senses the culmination of their shared alchemy, a moment where attraction and selfhood converge into a single luminous pulse. Gone is the frantic throb of unexamined desire. In its place flows a serene current of mutual empowerment. She stands beside him as both companion and catalyst, her silent strength inviting him to stand fully in his own. He feels the weight of past illusions lift, replaced by a profound clarity. Love is not a cage, but a mirror reflecting back the wholeness of two sovereign souls. He recalls the turning point that instant when he realized her no was not rejection, but redirection, an invitation to seek his own truth rather than her validation. From that moment, his pursuit transformed into pilgrimage. Every longing glance became a question posed to his own spirit. What do you seek? What are you willing to become? Her refusal to fill his emptiness with affection taught him to cultivate his own inner abundance, and in that cultivation she found her truest companion. In the pale dawn light, he watches her breathing, as though reading the soft cadence of waves upon a secluded shore. He marvels at how her every breath seems to orchestrate his own slowing, his rush of thoughts, beckoning him into a stillness that feels both alien and achingly familiar. It is in this shared stillness that he comprehends the paradox of attraction, that the fiercest magnetism arises not from fiery pursuit, but from tranquil presence. To stand with her is not to grasp, but to be held in shared sovereign tranquility. She offers him the gift of her unguarded gaze, and in returning that gaze, he no longer sees distance, but reflection. His own potency pulses in her eyes, not as something to be possessed, but as something to be shared. He recognizes that true power flourishes not in isolation, but in the fertile space between two hearts, committed to growth. In honoring her autonomy, he honors his own. In guarding his boundaries, he guards hers. Imagine two trees planted side by side, their roots intertwining beneath the soil, yet each trunk rising strong and separate toward the light. Their branches may brush in gentle union, their leaves whispering secrets in the breeze, but neither overshadows the other. Such is the essence of their bond, independent pillars of strength, that together create a sanctuary of mutual nourishment. His ego, once a lone edifice seeking conquest, now stands as part of a living grove, each tree fortified by the presence of the other. He notices how she greets each morning not as a conquest of time, but as a continuation of her own becoming. He learns from her that life is not a series of victories to be tallied, but a tapestry of moments to be woven with intentional care. When he stumbles into old patterns of anxious pursuit, she does not chastise him. She merely breathes beside him, a living testament to the peace that arises when one releases the need to control. In her steady rhythm, he rediscovers the natural cadence of his own heart. Their conversations have become rites of passage, questions and answers exchanged not to impress, but to illuminate. He recalls the night he asked, "What fear still shadows your confidence?" and found her vulnerability laid bare, not as weakness, but as an offering of trust. In that shared revelation, he learned that commanding one's ego begins with revealing one's truth. Each admission of fear, each confession of longing, became a brick in the bridge between their souls. Some might view their connection as mythic, an unattainable ideal whispered about in romantic lore. Yet he experiences it as profoundly real, a living, breathing covenant forged in authenticity. She taught him that forbidden attraction is not about restrictions, but about reverence, not about barriers, but about thresholds. To command his ego was to master his own capacity for love, and in mastering it he found his greatest freedom. As the sun ascends, spilling light across the room, he turns toward her and sees the reflection of his own transformation in her eyes. He no longer approaches her as prey, nor as victor. He approaches as equals two sovereign beings choosing each other in every moment. In this choice, he feels the culmination of the journey they've navigated together, a journey not toward possession, but toward partnership, not toward domination, but toward mutual liberation. And in that luminous space, he witnesses the final alchemy, the transmutation of forbidden attraction into sacred alliance. Desire no longer binds, it blesses. Need no longer suffocates, it illuminates. Ego no longer competes, it collaborates. Their magnetism endures not because it is forbidden, but because it is free, free to evolve, free to deepen, free to honor each soul's sovereign light. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.